Okay, so welcome. This is lecture 2, so it's Wednesday, July 2nd, and last week we went over the syllabus, did some kind of research exercises, stated our kind of learning goals, and I think most of us had some overall altruistic general goals, but also a few selfish, what's in it for me kind of thing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'll let Gary explain all that. But I also, we're in a unique position here where we have Blackstone on our campus, and I thought I'd also use this opportunity just to educate myself a little bit more about their, the mission and the relationship between Blackstone and the U. And what we did last time was really try to figure out a way in energy finance, not only to study. I've got 2 books here. There's an energy auditing book. There's also Amory Lovin's book, both of which are focused on the intimate relationship between money and energy, but also to see what we could do to go after some funds of our own. Have an outcome that's sort of not just academic from the classroom. So go after, well, I guess the EPA P3 is still academic, but it's an outcome that you normally wouldn't get from a class, just in getting a grade or whatever. And then I have a few other personal goals as well. We can get into those, but let me go ahead and put you right in front of the camera here, Paul, and then I'll go back to makeup and fix my hair. So if you don't mind, it's pretty easy. There's really nothing to touch here unless you want to. Well, let me bring up a browser for you. If you were to navigate to some page, though, I usually just use the Alt tab. It looks like you're a Mac guy, but Alt.
I'm by.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you want to touch the keyboard, it's here. If not, you can just go at it.
All right. All right. Am I looking at the camera or you guys? I prefer to talk to you guys rather than the camera. Is that good?
Yeah. Well, we can do that too if you want to spin it. I think.
So it's kind of got me in.
On the side, yeah.
Oh, you trying to get the screen?
Well,
you trying to get me on the screen?
No, I was trying to just kind of get you so you could give your spiel. And then I think that. Did you guys have you seen the videos yet? Does it pick up your audio okay?
Oh, I haven't seen any word.
One thing we might do, if there's like a question.
I can't get on Moodle. My Moodle's not. It's working now.
I think it's working now. If there's a question or whatever,
sure.
We'll just maybe repeat it and then
yep.
We'll go from there. So
maybe we need light kits out. It's kind of dark.
I know. Well,
can we set the lights to the?
Get too much light. It's gonna.
We'll hear your voice. That's all we need.
Yeah, I don't think people are watching to see me specifically.
You might want to set that contrast up just a little bit.
I guess you could. I don't know. Sure. I don't usually play around with
You
that.
might put some of that gamma up.
This is the problem with having a photojournalist in the classroom. You tell me when, Gary.
Okay, that's too far. Pull gamma up a bit. Brightness is total.
You tell me when.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah, now pull your contrast down just a little bit more.
All right, Mr.
Brightness ain't all the way up. Throw your brightness up.
Mr. Cannes Film Festival.
There you go.
Is that better?
Now I look washed out on down here, but
Much better. See, we can even see his reflection in the reflection.
Okay.
That's like 2 to 1.
alrighty.
So I guess I just want to learn a little bit more about.
Maybe I'll give a brief introduction to myself and the launch pads.
Yeah, your little bio too would be great.
Yeah.
I heard it way back when, but don't.
Right. I'm Paul Gladen, originally from the UK. I have a maths degree and an MBA I picked up along the way in the UK. Started my career with Arthur Andersen, which was one of the large accounting firms. So did some financial auditing. I know you mentioned energy auditing, so we need to discuss auditing at some point. We can try and scratch my brain to see what I remember about that. But then got heavily involved in consulting in the telecom industry in Europe during the mid to late 90s, sort of through the telecom internet boom. Doing strategy, market entry, performance management work for telecom operators across Europe. Then moved to New York with Arthur Andersen, setting up a research and innovation group, which was sort of a think tank for the firm. And then Arthur Andersen was the auditors of Enron, so we kind of got shredded, as I like to say, by the Department of Justice. So Andersen was no more. So did some freelance consulting for a while, worked with Ericsson, the global mobile cellular technology company. They had a global services organization based out of Dublin, Ireland, and I worked with their business consulting group. And then decided wanted to set up my own business, and interestingly was chatting with a good friend of mine that I'd studied with at university, David Firth, who had, by a circuitous route of marrying an American and moving out to the US, ended up teaching the University of Montana and the business school. He's an MIS professor there now.
Firth is on the faculty here.
Yeah. So I got chatting, I was living in New York, chatting about kind of the idea of, I'd come out to kind of visit him and his family, chatting about starting my own business and hiring a couple of kind of researchers. And he's like, we should think of hiring some people in Missoula. They kind of got smart people coming out of the university. They kind of cost you less than hiring people in New York. So that seems like a good idea. And then he had a non-traditional student come into his office one morning and say, hey, I've got this business idea. Kind of, what do you think? David's like, well, I think you should talk to my friend Paul because he's looking to get something started, seems sort of related. So he introduced me to this guy, Todd Taylor, who's now my business partner. We got introduced, figured there was a good kind of fit in terms of kind of where we were both at with things we were working on. Started the business, MuseView. I was still in New York. We hired some people here, decided to kind of get the business off the ground. And then after a couple of years, for a number of reasons, one of which was New York trying to tax me some more, decided that there was actually no reason why I couldn't just move from New York to Missoula, and so I moved here, February 2008. Continued kind of run the business.
What was the business name?
The business is MuseView, and we still run the business today. We do sort of content curation for professional services firms and also financial information. So, for example, we curate a bunch of regulatory material from the securities regulators, securities exchanges.
What's the significance of Muse? Is it M-U-S-E?
M-U-Z-E.
Oh, M-U-Z-E, okay.
It was easy. I could get that domain. But the original idea actually was around sort of foresight and innovation things. So it was kind of musing about kind of where we were kind of going with things. So it was kind of MuseView was sort of the idea. But what I discovered was, particularly I was looking to try and get professional services firms to build their own sort of innovation capabilities. The concept of innovation and foresight was difficult for them to get their heads around because they're much more in, what do our clients want today? Let's just give them that. So what I did find was helpful was that competitive and market intelligence is at least a good source for innovation thinking. So if I could get them at least focused about understanding what's going on in their marketplace, that will be a trigger for it. And that's essentially where we've ended up staying focused, is around helping professional services firms and CPAs and attorneys understand what's going on in their marketplaces around them. So if you're a CPA working with energy companies, you need to understand what's shaping the energy industry and have conversations with your clients around those kind of issues. Or if you're an employment attorney, you need to know what's the latest employment trends and employment legislation. So that's sort of what we focus on, is aggregating actually a lot of the sort of the white papers and newsletters and things like that professional services firms produce, and then provide that as intelligence back to those firms. But then also, after about a year after I'd moved here, cut a long story short, connected with a lady called Dawn McGee.
Oh, okay, good.
You know Dawn? Yeah, so and Dawn and I co-founded a group called the Hellgate Venture Network.
Okay,
which is an entrepreneurial networking group that now meets once a month. Well, in fact, it's always met once a month since April 2009. And it's pretty much open to anyone that's sort of interested in entrepreneurship. So they are an entrepreneur, they're interested in it, students come along, business school faculty come along, attorneys, CPAs, and it's a very informal structure. We meet once a month on a Thursday at like 4:30. We do some networking, we provide free beer, and we get an entrepreneur to talk about their business for literally 10 minutes. We put them on the clock, have them kind of tell us a little something about them and their story, do a little kind of Q&A, creates a little kind of focus point. We go around the room, just make sure everyone sort of is introduced, and then we go back to networking. So that's been a really kind of fun thing to be involved in, and has had me sort of engaged with the startup community, kind of here in Missoula, as well as then also because of my connections with David Firth, got invited to sort of guest lecture at the business school, got invited to be a business plan competition judge, and now with Cameron Lawrence, I'm currently co-chair of MADE, which is the Montana Academy of Distinguished Entrepreneurs, which runs the business plan competition and the Pioneer in Industry Award and the MADE lecture series.
Is this Movado business?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I sort of moved to Missoula, been an entrepreneur, been involved in the startup community, been involved with the business school and students. So through that, started to hear about the Blackstone Launchpad and the potential that it was coming to Montana and the University of Montana, which has transpired that has happened, and now I'm the director of it. But the background is, so Blackstone is kind of what I think is the world's largest sort of alternative investment firm in terms of kind of private equity and kind of venture capital and alternative investments.
When you say alternative investment firm, what's that mean as opposed to a conventional investment firm?
I think as opposed to just investing in kind of publicly quoted stocks.
Okay.
So they are more creative and innovative in the kinds of investments that they are making.
Okay.
And they've been phenomenally successful. And their foundation, which they set up, I think, in 2008, as most kind of large, successful organizations have a foundation of some sort.
Right.
They decided that their mission or their focus would be on stimulating entrepreneurship across the U.S.
Okay.
And they would invest $50 million in entrepreneurship programs. And rather than trying to do that from scratch, they would find programs that are operating elsewhere across the U.S. and say, if they're good, let's figure out if we can sort of replicate them.
Oh, okay.
So they've gone and found programs, and they have three primary areas. One are some accelerator programs. Second are some sort of entrepreneur network programs. And the third is the Launchpad program, which is based on a program that came out of the University of Miami.
Oh, okay.
So the University of Miami developed the Launchpad program 6-7 years ago, and its philosophy is to help students pursue entrepreneurship as a viable, or explore entrepreneurship as a viable career path, which for me is quite an interesting concept, because certainly when I graduated, if someone had said, hey, go start your own business, I'd have thought they were crazy. My parents would probably have disowned me. It would have been a tough thing to do 25 years ago. I mean, by no means impossible. Plenty of people did it, but it was not considered necessarily a conventional thing to do. It was far better to go get a good job with a good organization. But I think today it's a very powerful idea that, one, the barriers to starting a business are much lower than they were 25 years ago in terms of technology and social media and globalization, so your access to markets and so forth is far greater, and the costs of starting something are lower. And also that the workplace or the employment environment is much more volatile. You may get a great job tomorrow with a great organization. There's no guarantee it's going to be there in 2 years' time. So I think developing those entrepreneurial skills, whether you take it kind of straight out of the gate after, or as a student or after graduating, or if you just sort of dabble with it for a while and you may return to it kind of later in life, later in your career, when the right opportunity or the right idea arises. So that's the sort of philosophy. I mean, the simple way to describe it is helping students and alumni that want to start their own business, that have that, I've got a great idea, or kind of, gee, I wish someone would create something that did X, or I'm really passionate about this, so maybe I can start a business that does something in that.
So when you said the initial $50 million of investment, was that just into this launch pad, or was that the...
So the $50 million has been, and is, as an investment, I should make it clear, because Blackstone is an investment firm, but this is coming from their foundation, so this is actually grant funding.
Okay.
So it's not investments that Blackstone is making.
They're not expecting to get that back.
No.
Okay.
The return they would like to see is the result of businesses being created, jobs being created, and economic kind of wealth being created as part of that process. But the funds go into running the programs. So that 50 million is spread across those three different themes of accelerators, entrepreneur networks, and launchpads.
Yeah, okay.
And the launchpad piece, and I think there's about probably slightly less than a third, I think, has gone into the launchpad programs, is now in 6 states and I think 16 university campuses. So it's in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, Montana, and California.
Okay.
And it's in 2 or more locations in each of those states. So in Montana, it's at UM and MSU.
Yeah, I did see the office there at
Right.
MSU. Right.
Yeah.
I think right near UC as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a sort of key sort of philosophical thing as well, to make sure it's in a sort of neutral location on campus.
Yeah.
So this is not tied to the business school. The business school here is phenomenally supportive and thinks it's awesome and has been heavily involved in helping bring it on, but it was also very strong in saying it shouldn't be in the business school. We need to put it somewhere else to make it clear that an English major or a forestry student or a chemistry student should come and use this resource if it's interesting to them.
Nice.
And that includes Missoula College. And all the students here were very much keen to see them and work with them, and as we've only been open kind of 4.5 months, so but we'll be looking for ways to sort of try and get the word out across campus and across Missoula College to say we're here to help students.
Well, I've certainly been talking it up, and I've had. It seems like you work kind of closely with Joe Fungi too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean technically we, as an entity, we report into Joe Fungi as the director of Tech Transfer, and into Scott Wittenberg as the VP of Research and Creative Scholarship, which again is good because it makes us sort of neutral from a school or kind of college perspective. And the other advantage of being kind of tied in with Joe is because of Joe's role both in Tech Transfer, which obviously has kind of commercial business startup potential, but also because his other role is the CEO of Montech. So we now have sort of, we think about this as sort of, with the business school as well, that we've got this sort of continuum of capabilities to stimulate people with research ideas, with business plan ideas in the business school, with just ideas that people walk in, that we've got a place both to facilitate their process and their thinking, and then potentially there's a business plan competition for them to participate in, but they could also potentially migrate sort of across the river into Montech as an incubator space for them to kind of start that business and see if they can kind of grow it. So we're sort of focused on trying to have more of this sort of ecosystem and continuum, and tying ourselves closely into the business community through things like the Hellgate Venture Network and the Missoula Economic Partnership, which is kind of also very, very supportive and very engaged in what we're doing as well. So the way the program works is essentially a student, or we're open to alumni as well. So a student or alumni, so a student or alumni that has an idea, and it can be literally, hey, I've just got this idea that's kind of rattling around in my head, or they may have been working on something for a while, they might have written a kind of business plan or written something down, or they may even have been working on a business for a while. So we've had some people come in that have got an existing business and they're looking for some help to move it forward. So they register with us, they put a little bit of information in about their idea, and they schedule a meeting with me or with Jen Stevens, who's the program manager for the Launchpad that we just recently hired, just started with us. So there are two of us available to sort of do consultations. We basically sit down with that individual or that team, and there can be kind of several people involved, and really just try to help them think through what is their idea, and where are they trying to take it, and how do they go about validating it, and where do they need help. So some people will be very clear, okay, I know what I'm doing here, but I need a piece of legal advice, or trying to figure out how we might find a kind of contract manufacturer to do this for us. So whatever those needs are, we are trying to make sure that they've sort of thought through all the different elements of starting a business, but then if there are particular areas they need help, that we can try and connect them with people either here in the business community or more kind of broadly with individuals that could perhaps open a door for them in a particular industry. So if they're focused on kind of the food and beverage industry or the retail industry, we can introduce them to people that could be a potential customer or a potential supplier, or can kind of create some connections for them to move them forward. So we're a sort of combination of free consulting plus connecting people to people and resources and things that are available to them. So there's a few kind of key principles just to outline. One is we are open, say, to all students and all alumni, regardless of background. We will help with any idea. We're not a sort of business plan competition or a kind of Shark Tank or anything. We're not evaluating your idea and deciding whether or not we'll help you. Our role is to facilitate your thinking for you to figure out whether the idea you've got has got legs or not.
Yeah, I was sent the carbon nanotube from hemp fibers, so he's yet to arrive in my office, but I don't know if you can see what he's
Yeah. So we're trying to see if we can help him. So. And we've had ideas literally all over the shop, from environmental stuff to software ideas to an alumni that's come in who's making dog booties for dogs so they can get better grip in the snow, and now she's discovered that actually there's a demand in Arizona for ones that stop the dogs' pads from burning on the kind of hot concrete.
Insulation.
Yeah.
Heat.
Yeah. So
Probably branch that into ones that come up a little bit further to keep the dog from licking.
oh,
Because most dogs are allergic to certain kind of dog foods, and when they get allergic to them, then
oh.
it's just a little
I'm meeting with her this afternoon, so I'll mention that.
bit knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's not just business ideas for Montana, it's really for stuff you can do from the web or...
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's
not limited geographically.
No, although I think that's part of the fun thing is kind of increasingly businesses aren't constrained geographically. We can do a lot of cool things from Montana, but yeah, there's no real, I mean, we'd obviously like to see that many of these businesses will, one, be successful, and that they'll be successful based in Montana and create jobs and create wealth coming into the state, but that's not a filter we would apply and say, oh, you're looking to start a business somewhere else? Well, we're not going to help you then. So, yeah. So we'll work with anyone. We'll work with them. We'll meet with them as many times as they like, and they can come in as frequently or as infrequently as they like. We don't provide funding because we don't have funds to do that, but we're working on looking at some programs to have, well, one will help a student or alumni figure out whether their business needs funding. It's one of the interesting things I've sort of discovered is the vast majority of people walk in and say, hey, I've got a business idea, so I need to figure out how to get it funded. And one of our first sort of steps is to say those two things are not kind of directly related. Just because you have a business and a business idea doesn't necessarily mean you need funding. There are ways for you to grow a business successfully without having to take outside funding. So helping people understand whether they do need funding, what sort of funding would be appropriate, and what sources of funding they might go to if they need it is something we'll do. So we don't have funding ourselves, but we're actually starting to work on putting some kind of funds and programs together, working with Joe Fungi and with others that could provide some level of kind of really early stage seed funding, particularly for people that probably need a few $1,000s to sort of develop a prototype or go do some research or get some initial kind of coding and things done.
Isn't there a little financial reward associated with the Roboto student business plan? So
Yeah, the team that just won the last competition, which was New Leaf, which was pretty cool because the two guys leading it were student workers with me in the Launchpad. So they'd been benefiting from a little from the Launchpad, but yeah, so they won the competition, and the business plan competition has several prizes. It has a sort of first, second, and third, but then some other prizes as well. I think they walked away with about $15,000.
Oh wow! And is that all out of like the Roboto? I mean,
No, mostly it's pretty much funded out of sponsorship money.
Oh.
So the organising committee for the business plan competition goes out every year and asks for sponsorship.
Oh, I see.
We've got a big piece of sponsorship, and I'm gonna forget some people here. So if anyone listens to this, I apologise for those that I'm missing. But MEP, Missouri Economic Partnership, has made a big commitment. A couple of the banks are important players, but we get all sorts of people funding. I mean, Big Sky Brewing.
Okay.
So Bjorn Nebosniam, and he won the business plan competition with the idea for the brewery many years ago. So he's a kind of big supporter and fan as well. So yeah.
What does New Leaf do?
They are looking at doing environmental monitoring. It may even tie in a little to our sort of EPA E3 discussion as well, actually, because what they're looking at is trying to develop low cost, really not so much develop, because the hardware is sort of largely out there and the costs are coming down and they don't want to be in the hardware business, but essentially using low cost sensors and then creating sort of networks of those low cost sensors so you can monitor environmental conditions. So one of their initial sort of test case scenarios has been in fracking environments.
Oh, yeah.
So to be able to monitor, so you'd be able to put these little kind of boxes, you could stick it kind of in your backyard, so consumers could go buy them, and then they could upload the data they're tracking over kind of Wi-Fi. And as they've said, ultimately, if you've got a group of people doing that, you can sort of watch the environmental conditions like kind of watching the weather. So they're looking at, there are sensors now that'll monitor for just about any kind of gas combination. So they're looking at that, they're looking at kind of water monitoring and at kind of soil monitoring. So, but their sort of thrust is more the data play than it is the hardware. They're sort of, look, the hardware costs are getting low enough that this should be accessible to lots of people, and we can now start to give people real-time access to data rather than waiting for an EPA study that will come out 3 years later and say, yep, you're right, you were poisoned 3 years ago.
Steve Running said there's a methane sensor going up near the landfill. Is this part of the New Leaf as well?
I don't think they're involved in that, but that's certainly another area that they've, in terms of them looking at different scenarios where they could do what they're trying to do. I think kind of landfills is definitely an area.
I guess my other question, so Hellgate Ventures,
Hellgate Venture Network.
Oh, Hellgate Venture Network.
And I want to be clear, we are an entrepreneur, we're a business networking group.
Right. Okay.
And we're open to anyone. We're very kind of sociable, very friendly. We literally only exist as a LinkedIn group and a Facebook page. Because I know sometimes, because we put the word venture in there, people think we're a fund.
Right.
Or an angel network or something. We're none of those. I mean, we have people that are in those fields, and if you're looking to find money, these are great meetings to come to network with and potentially get introductions to people that can help you. But yeah, and would love for anyone that's kind of here and kind of listening to come to any of our meetings. Yeah. If you just go to LinkedIn, search for Hellgate Venture Network Group and request to join it, or just go to Facebook, facebook.com/HVNMT. You can find us on there, or just email me.
Yeah, Dawn put me in touch with this other gal, Sherry, who's with the High Stakes Venture, and she gave us enough money to get the build a reasonable car, it's used to
Cool.
for our electric car
Great.
competition.
Yeah.
See where that ends up going. We'll have to start batch production for next year now.
So that's kind of the launch pad. I mean,
Yeah.
say we're open to any student or alumni. We're open 5 days a week, pretty much 9 to 5. There's someone in our space on campus, on the main UM campus in the UC, second floor above the bookstore. There's also a website, umt.thelaunchpad.org.
Good.
Or people can email me, paul.gladen, which is GLADEN, at umontana.edu. Or just sort of Google us on the UM website,
Yeah.
you'll track
I
us
think- I
down.
think what I'll probably end up doing after lecture here, Paul, is just
Put some
putting
contact
links
details,
in the-
yeah.
I'll probably put them right in the Moodle channel.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so I feel like I have a much better idea now about what Blackstone does in the Launchpad model. It sounds like your main focus is sort of guiding people through,
Mhm.
here's the idea, you thought it all through,
Right.
what's the best one to
Yeah.
select? So I thought maybe we'll probably just take a little Camtasia break here, but then this next session, what I thought I'd do is just sit down with the idea.
Sure.
I don't know if we want to
Yeah.
build a little ranking matrix or something
Sure.
like that, sort of take some votes. I thought we should try to sort of quantify these things. Monday, we looked at some of the previous year's winning ideas, and there's some are very sophisticated. You can tell.
Yeah,
some are
I
kind
scanned
of-
through the list as well. There were scientific words in there that I did not
Yeah,
understand.
I think a lot of times, and and most of these things are fairly faculty driven. It's going to be
Mhm.
some faculty idea, and he's been crunching away on it. He's like, okay,
Right.
I'm throwing up bodies at it, maybe we get something.
Right.
something out of it.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
Okay, so let's just take a little break here. We're getting close to the 10 o'clock hour, and then we'll go
Sure.
into.
Yeah.
I actually would like to know what is trending right now in the renewable energy market before we went into that. I
Huh.
mean, kind of get your idea on
Okay.
what the top.
Oh, you want to do that? Yeah, we can do that now.
Yeah, well, we can do it now, or we can do it later, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I'd just like to know what the top 3 or 4 is, so we know, we're not searching for something that's way down at number 1050 when we can just go right
Yeah, I mean,
to number
I'm not
3.
sure I have a
Working
top
knowledge.
of the head knowledge of what those things are. I mean, I can certainly kind
Yeah.
of brainstorm some things with you about things that I think would be more interesting to pursue.
Yeah,
but-
that's a tough one too. 'Cause I mean, there's certain things that are trending right now pretty heavily in academia.
Right.
One of which is organic photovoltaics. Just 2 days ago, we had a gal just finished her real science degree at the University of Michigan, who is now going to work for Detroit Diesel. She was in Detroit, now she's going to Seattle. She's like, yeah, I spent 4 years realizing that nobody's going to buy organic photovoltaics because but I mean, that's stuff that's trending now in academia.
Yeah.
It probably won't hit the business, industry, community.
Yeah, I mean, I
10,
think-
20 years, who knows?
As I was sort of scanning down the list of the previous winners and some of your things, I think the question is really, do you want to do something that's sort of almost kind of like hard science,
Mhm.
or is it more about how do you actually get traction around some activity that is kind of energy related and sort of environmentally sustainable? Because I think that's, in some ways, the technology will continue to evolve and develop, but the bigger barrier in many ways is around adoption.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you can, it depends what you're personally sort of interested in. Is it more in the kind of the technology and the science, or is it about how do we get some of the technology and science right?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
which then is kind of spending another 3 years trying to develop a technological solution may not be your best move. It may be to say what technologies are out there that people haven't found a good way to get customers or businesses or organizations to engage with adopting them and using them. What are the barriers to doing that, and how do we help incentivize and motivate people to do those things perhaps just by better design, and that could be marketing, it could be process design, it could be the design of the technology or the devices, but it's not necessarily around the core of what the science is that makes that thing work.
Right. That's one thing that Loveland said here. I don't know if you guys have read the first few pages of this, but one thing he says is that to go zero fossil fuels by 2050 requires no innovation whatsoever. It's more just the adoption and refinement of existing ideas, marketing.
Yeah, I'm going to give a really, really kind of crude example of that. It still sort of amazes me that trying to recycle stuff in Missoula is so damn hard.
Yeah.
So is there a solution to that?
Yeah. I even bumped into
I
a
think
guy.
it's the hemp fiber that he was talking about. Just gonna throw that out there.
I might try to get an individual in front of the class later who actually had a business plan for recycling glass in Missoula. He said, yeah, it just didn't pencil out. And
Yep.
I haven't spent any time, looking at the glass. We did a little, just kind of back of the envelope order of magnitude thing on aluminum in Missoula, and it ended up being, I don't know, what was it? $500,000 worth of aluminum, ends up, somewhere, maybe it's at
Right.
Pacific, maybe it's a landfill, but there's about a $500,000 worth of aluminum cans that come to Missoula, sort of pencil that out in terms of salaries, that
Right.
should be something that's supportable, at least,
Yep.
Getting down to the nitty gritty, I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be an outreach to the public, people that don't have jobs or something, bring your aluminum cans in here. And you
Yeah.
would you have to undercut Pacific for that, or would you just
No,
go with the?
it's a good question. No, I
Go with the fact that they're on that side of town and most of the bums are on this side of town.
So we just need to provide transportation for the bums.
there's a couple things on that. One, I got a phone call, and I wish I could remember his name, I got it in my spreadsheet, that said he has access to sort of sub-minimum wage labor,
Mhm.
bums, I don't know if that's the- And there's another one too, I heard that Amsterdam is now paying some of their city workers in alcohol. So they realize these people are going to be on the streets forever, they're alcoholics, and the easiest way to pay them is just to give them what they want. They're not getting
Right.
wronged on the job, but just sort of giving them a
Yeah.
metered amount of.
Yeah. Well, there are, some of those sort of counterintuitive, maybe not that particular one, but there are often kind of counterintuitive solutions to some of these things that are just about addressing the problem a different way.
Well, I had a cameraman shooting with me last summer, and I didn't like the way he worked unless I fed him 2 or 3 beers.
Oh, really?
It was good. It was good at that point. There was no camera shake. There was no nothing. He was a little bit loud sometimes. We fed him 2 or 3 more, and he was done. Just absolutely done.
That is a sweet spot.
Well, you couldn't get him to the point to where, here, you've had to, you're good, this is perfect. And he was like, and he'd get to like 4 or 5, and then it was just out, and everything was hell and high water, and
Sounds like the rest of us.
Hmm.
All right, well, we'll take a Camtasia break, and we'll start looking at our ideas.
freaking sprinkler this morning.
You rode through the sprinkler?
No, my sprinkler comes on, I have my bike parked in it. and
Oh.
got my